I lived a life that almost I had a control over everything. God didn't really need to be a part of that. Not that I intentionally kept him distant, I didn't need to partner with him. But then there came to a place in my life where everything just, the net had fallen out and I was falling, and then I needed God. I needed him in a way that I hadn't needed him before. My safety's in you. You're my healer, my deliverer, my savior, my comforter, my friend. I won't let go. I will cling to you. So my name is Lisa Filip. I live in Dallas, Texas now. Moved here about 9 months ago. Prior to that, I lived my entire life just north of Chicago. I was born and raised Catholic, although I would say that I identified as Catholic but was not a practicing Catholic. My dad was Methodist and my mom was Catholic, and everybody on her side of the family was Catholic. I was baptized a baby about 6 weeks old. Made my first confirmation at about 9 or 10. We did not go to Mass. The only time I went to Mass was either with my aunt for holidays or if my aunt was in town and our whole family went together. I had a great childhood. It was wonderful. It was adventurous, lots of fun things, friends, played sports, had my younger brother. That was all wonderful. So I had self-identified as Catholic. And I was very proud to be Catholic because that was part of our heritage or our tradition, right? My grandparents and all that. But I lived a life that I thought in an illusion that if I just did things right, if I just got the A, if I just performed, if I was the star on the team and orchestrated my life in a way that almost I had a control over everything. I lived a good life. I won't say that I didn't sin, but I was not promiscuous. I didn't overly drink. I worked really hard. I tried to live a good and moral life at the time that my conscience was formed. And I really thought if I did that, that was more than enough, and that I judged. I thought, well, I'm better than that person or these other people. So when I was 18, I was getting ready to go to college. I received a Division I scholarship to play field hockey at a university, and I was working at a summer bar, like a place on a lake. And I was working there as a waitress, made very, very good money. I met a man who was a little bit older than me, but was a bartender, and I was very attracted to him. I was attracted to his intelligence, his humor, his charisma. He had a lot of life in him, a lot of joy, and I was very drawn to that. He was incredibly smart. So we started dating, and I went away to school for a year, but then I had come back. And in that time, I started going to school at a local school where I lived. We continued to date. But even outside of that, both of us lived a very, very secular life. It was all just about working, going to school, having fun. So we dated about 6 years, and then we got engaged for it was exactly a year. We got married in the Catholic Church. Prior to that, we did do in Chicago, it was called pre-Cana. It was a one-day thing. At that time, it was good for the most part, but it wasn't like I felt like I connected with God in any way through that day or through the material or the presentations that were shown. After that, we got married, and we just were doing what I thought everybody else was supposed to do. Go to work, have a home, pay your bills, live your life. So at about 6 years into the marriage, I was at work, and I came back from lunch, and I had a voicemail, and it was my neighbor who had left a message saying that there was a woman at our home, and she was throwing trash on the lawn. And so I had called my husband at the time and said, what is going on? I just got a call from the neighbor. And he told me a story that made sense at the time. But as time went on, there was something inside of me that said, this is not right. And so I confided in a couple of friends, and as I spoke the story out loud, I recognized that I had a lot of uneasiness with the story, and there was something about the story that was not right. So I contacted this friend who had some struggles in their marriage. So I said, do you think possibly that he's having an affair? And this friend said, absolutely not. He would never do that to you. But if you really want to know, contact your cell phone company and get your cell phone records. So I contacted the company. I got a year's worth of records, and it took about a week for them to get to my office. And then when they got to the office, I called every number on the list until I got to one number. A woman that I recognized, somebody who I had previously met through outings, through work that my husband was a part of. So I knew her, I knew her voice, I'd met her several times, and I knew that they were friends. And I knew what I thought was true now was true. So after I realized this, I was completely enraged. I got in my car, I drove home, I called him, I said, where are you? He says, I'm on my way back from a business trip. And I started to question him, get very angry. He was in denial. He was like, I don't know what you're talking about. What are you trying to get at? And then when I got home and I walked in the house, he was sitting on the sofa, and I just asked him, you're having an affair, aren't you? And he said, yes, I am. In that moment, life just changed in an instant. The illusion that I lived in of if I just do the right thing, I'll be protected, everything will be okay, was gone. And everything was shattered. I felt completely broken. Something crazy that I used to do was I would close all the blinds in the house and the curtains because I was ashamed. I was embarrassed that this is what my life had become, and I wanted nobody to see inside, just like Adam and Eve hid in the garden. And I'd been away from the church for so long, and I'm sure it was grace. I went to confession after about 3 weeks of hearing this news and just realized I now needed God. So while I'm in confession, I hadn't been in a long time. This was my second confession ever. I didn't know what to do. The priest was wonderful. He guided me through. I basically said, this is only my second confession ever, but I've been away from the church for a long time and I need God. This is what's happening in my marriage and I don't know what to do. I need help. I need help. And I don't remember all of what he said. It was in such a state of chaos. My mind was in such a state of chaos. So the priest had told me I was very focused on my husband, the desire and the control to wanting him to stop this affair, to stop doing some of the things that he was doing. And the priest said, you don't have any control over him. Take your focus off of him and recognize what you need right now and take care of yourself. And at that time, I have to be honest with you, I didn't know what that meant because they lived a very external life and no interior life at all. So after confession, I started going to Mass every week. At that point in time, I had never made my confirmation. And so I searched around to some local churches to join a confirmation program and found one. So every week I would go to an RCA program. All the while, home at life was chaos. That confirmation program was probably maybe the one thread that was holding life together. But there was a lot of mistrust in the relationship. I would catch myself searching his phone at night, going through his clothes because he wasn't being honest with me. And I was just falling apart on the inside, barely keeping it together, barely making it through work, making it through the day, anything. And then one night I had decided to search his car in the middle of the night, and underneath the front seat was a stack of bills. And these were bills that electric bills, water bills, everything. Everything was delinquent. He hadn't been paying anything. I came to realize that he had not been paying our mortgage for a very, very long time. And not only had it foreclosed, that it was already sold in a sheriff's sale. And so there was only a matter of time where we were going to be getting kicked out of the home. That was probably the time I realized that I needed to get out of this situation, out of this relationship. So in addition to finding out about the home, I realized through checking his phone and different things, he was still in contact with this woman. He still had a relationship with her. He was still seeing her. He told me he was not willing to give up that relationship, even to maintain just a friendship with her. And so at that point, that was when I realized that this was very unhealthy for me. I was going to a place where I was afraid I was not going to recover financially, emotionally, spiritually. I was extremely unhealthy. And so I had made the decision and sat down and said that I'm going to leave. When this home forecloses, I'm leaving and I am moving. I moved all of my stuff, whatever stuff that I took, into my parents' basement. I was hugely ashamed and embarrassed that I went from being so highly successful in my career, making money, to now living with my parents. And so I didn't go home right away. I lived out of my car. I had lived out of the trunk of my car, and I would sleep on different friends' sofas for many, many weeks, until one day I got so frustrated and I humbled myself and I had to go home. And my parents were amazing. My dad actually said, "We're so glad you're here. You can stay as long as you like. We're glad you're home." And my dad very, very much represented God the Father to me. In that moment, he was a really good man. And I owe so much goodness to him. So after I moved, I continued to go to Mass every week. I was faithful to that. And about 6 weeks after I moved, now I got laid off as a part of a reduction in force. The entire department that I was part of, we all got laid off. And I'd worked there for 11 or 12 years. And so what was I going to do now? So I got a little bit of severance money, and I called some friends because I wanted to escape my life, run from myself, and said, let's go on a cruise, let's backpack Europe. And nobody had any vacation time money, whatever, to go. And so I had a friend who's, I knew that his sister's husband was going on this mission trip. And so I called him up and said, listen, if you're not going to travel with me, get me on that trip. And he literally said to me, are you crazy? Have you lost your mind? And I said, no. Call your brother-in-law and get me on that trip. And so 3 weeks before that trip, I bought my ticket and I went on a mission trip to Peru. So I go on this trip, and I still remember the paperwork said, come with a spirit of discipleship. And I thought, I don't know what the heck that means, but I'm going. And so I get off the plane and I was like, what is that smell? And a friend of mine says, like, welcome to Piora, Lisa. And then we load all our stuff up into this truck. And I had never been out of the country. This is my first passport stamp ever. I don't really know anybody, even this one friend. He's a very distant kind of friend. But all these other missionaries were wonderful and welcoming. I encountered Christ in them through their hospitality. We started to go out and serving the poor, and in building homes and giving away food and visiting the elderly. I just, time and time again, I encountered God in them, Christ in them, in their hugs, in their smiles, in love. That the priest that was down there was this very holy, joyful, sold out man who I just kept thinking, he gave up a sports car and a career, like coming out of Notre Dame, for this, to live among, there must be something to all of this, because what he carried and what he had is what I lacked. And I wanted this joy and this peace. And so just time and time again, just encountering God. And then there was this one particular moment We were at a healing mass, and I'd never been to anything like this ever. Didn't even know this was anything in the States. Thousands of people show up, standing room only. The Blessed Sacrament is professed around, and everybody is clapping and yelling Christo and celebrating. And at one point in time, the priest commissions missionaries that if you're comfortable, you can go out to the crowd and you can lay hands. And people come with great faith that miracles, expectant faith will happen. And so I sat in my pew, and a deacon on the trip came and laid hands on me, on my head. And there was a Peruvian woman sitting next to me who put her hand on my back, and they both prayed me. And in that moment, I just wept. I wept. I couldn't believe that out of 2,000 people, that he found me to lay his hands on me, that he knew that I was so broken, that I needed more. I needed that love of God. I needed that joy that that priest had, that I didn't have. And I believe now, looking back, I know that I was baptized in the Holy Spirit that day. And I experienced something that was very pivotal. I talk about this moment a lot. So coming back from that trip, I'll never forget actually coming to the Miami airport. I wanted to kiss the floor because all that I just saw in poverty, and I realized being born in the United States of America and having the education that I had, that I was gonna make it, that I was gonna be okay. And I had no language to put around the experience I had. I knew I was different. I knew I had joy, but I still had a lot of healing to be done. I had to work through a lot of forgiveness of what had happened with my husband, my ex-husband now, and forgiveness of myself. I had to go through divorce proceedings and many, many things, but I knew now that God was alive. He wasn't just real and just the creator of the universe, but he was alive, and I could obtain him. I can draw close to him, and he can draw close to me. And so I continued to go to Mass. I started to get involved in parish life. I also was seeing a very Christian therapist at the time. I went on multiple retreats. And then about a year later, I was still struggling. My parents were concerned. So they paid for me to go back on that trip again. And they thought, it did such a radical thing the first time, we're gonna send her back. So they sent me back. And at this point in time, I recognized that I will get out of the boat. In the scripture, it talks about Peter got out of the boat and walked on water. I will get out of the boat and I will walk on water, and I will leave behind all of what I was entrapped in, all of what I tried to cover myself with, all of what I thought I needed to have to be somebody, for people to like me, for me to feel important, to have value. I will leave it all to walk on water, and I will go anywhere that he wants to send me for him. And I've clinged to him for everything, and it hasn't been easy. I've went through many hardships since then. My dad passed away. I lost a job. I went back to Peru alone for 6 months, but I've clung to Jesus. I was willing to change my life. Every part of my life, I was willing to allow to fall away and partner with the Lord to do whatever it was that he called me to do. And there was such a hunger inside of me that I wanted nothing but more of Jesus. Only Jesus, only him. I went back to Peru 8 more times, several times alone, spending months at a time. I started blogging. At some point in time, I went to this conference called Encounter and had a really powerful experience there, and then was asked to be a part of the Encounter team, so moved to Dallas. And through this process, just started to trust the Lord more and more and more and more. And I trusted that he had me. I trusted that he was going to provide for me. I trusted that I was safe in him. I was safer in him than anything that the world could provide me.
10 years of sharing the peace of Christ. Shalom World, God's own channel.